I'm the founding Chief Executive and now the Chief Scientific Officer for Cancer Research Malaysia. Next slide, please. So why do we exist? As I mentioned this morning, unfortunately, when we look at the global incidence of cancer, about 50% of cancers occur in the Asian population. But when you look at the deaths due to cancer, then nearly 60% of the deaths due to cancer occur in Asia. So we account for a disproportionate number of deaths due to cancer. I think what is really sad is that we currently only make up less than 10% of the global cancer research. And that really means that when we talk about therapeutics and discoveries, it's really missing out the Asian population. So what is Cancer Research Malaysia? We're a non-profit organization. We're fully funded by grants as well as by donations. And our mission is to just ensure the Asians are not left out in the fight against cancer. Because if we don't fund research, we don't fund the development of new solutions, how are we going to be able to improve the survivorship or enable prevention of cancer overall? Next slide, please. So what are our goals? We have 3 goals. The first goal is to accelerate the treatment of cancers in Asian populations. Short-term goal is to make sure that we have 10 new treatments or 10 new biomarkers that can enable better selection of treatments in patients by the year 2030, and I'll show you some of where we are with those. Second is to accelerate the prevention and the screening for cancers in the Asian population. I'll tell you a little bit about our goal of reaching 10 individualized screening strategies by the year 2040. And then finally, as I mentioned this morning, there's a gap between the rich and the poor. So our goal is to be able to close the gap between the rich and the poor, enable access to care for the B40 population, and halve the gap in survival between the rich and the poor by the year 2040. These are hugely ambitious goals. 10 new treatments by the year 2030. It's a hugely ambitious goal. And to be honest, when my team first looked at it, they said, boss, we know you're mad, but how mad can you be? 10? Seriously? We're not going to get there. So next slide, please. So what's our strategy? Ultimately, you have to have a very strong strategy. We have 3 pillars. The first is we need to start from basics. So I mentioned this morning that when I first started the organization, one of my first tasks was to sit outside the operating theatre and the surgeon would bring out a bit of jaw and tell me, okay, which part of the oral cancer do you want? And I'm like, this is a person's jaw. It's very stark for you to, as a researcher, be reminded that this is actually ultimately everything that you're working with as a patient at the end of it, and you need to be able to deal with that. So we built the resources that are unique to the Asian population. We've built a large resource of oral cancer cell lines, now a nasopharyngeal cancer cell line that is EBV positive. We've also developed animal models that enable us to test out different treatments in the cancer patients. We've also developed biobanks. We now have one of the largest tissue resources for breast cancer in the Asian population. We've also collected plasma samples, microbiome samples, and so on. We also have one of the largest cohort of breast cancer patients in Southeast Asian populations. So currently we have about 8,000 breast cancer patients in the study and about 4,000 healthy controls. And it's really a pleasure to be able to lead studies that have been across hospitals to bring those resources together. They are both cross-sectional in nature and longitudinal for some of the other studies. That's really important. Building the core resource is really important because it's on layering on top of that that enables research to be conducted. The second is to innovate and apply tools at scale. So it's very important that we think about the best tools that are available to apply on our very limited resources. So the 3 words that I mentioned this morning, usually you can only choose 2. If you choose fast and cheap, no good. Cheap and fast, no cheap and fast, no, well, okay, but basically you can choose 2. You can't usually choose 3 of those, right? But as a non-profit organization, we try as much as possible to be fast, cheap, and good. So that means that we need to be able to apply, where possible, the best possible tools. So we use, for example, the CRISPR essential drug screens, gene screens for oral cancer and nasopharyngeal cancer. We've done drug screens. We built the largest genomic map of breast cancers in the Asian population. We were able to increase the proportion of Asian breast cancer genomic maps from 2% at the time that we started to 19% from Malaysia alone in the global picture. So that was really nice from a whole exome and whole genome perspective. We've also built transcriptomic maps and now more recently spatial transcriptomic maps, and this gives us a better understanding of how the immune cells interact with the cancer cells and what we can do with those information to be able to develop better ways of treating cancers. And then maps such as genotyping. So we've done a lot of genotyping, whole genome genotyping experiments, as well as germline sequencing experiments, and this has led to a nice publication in New England Journal of Medicine that's described the genes that need to be included in panel gene testing for breast cancer patients. And this is now included in clinical recommendations in the NCCN and so on. And then finally is to collaborate. As a research organization, we're still very small. So even though we have a large congregation of scientists that are very talented, we still consider ourselves very small. So we collaborate both with international researchers or local researchers, with clinicians, with patients, with engineers, with computer scientists, with extensively, primarily because we don't believe that we have all the skill sets. Many people have better ideas and smarter than we are. And so we really hope to build teams to translate our findings to the clinic. So our goal is to do end-to-end from bench to clinic, but also in the reverse direction from clinic back to bench. So we have clinical working groups where we've been able to learn from doctors. So we sit oftentimes with doctors, and initially they regard me as this very stupid person who just doesn't understand anything. But over time, because of their patience, I ask questions and we get to learn what are the clinically most important questions? What do we actually want to develop that will be clinically meaningful so that our resources can be best placed on the key questions that will actually change clinical practice? And that's what we're trying to do as a nonprofit organization. Next step, please. So what are our achievements in terms of treatment? So as you've heard this morning, we've developed an oral cancer vaccine that has nearly 90% tumor control. We've also developed a new treatment option based on the genomic characteristics of Asian patients. This one I'm super proud of because it's a germline marker that's present in 60% of Asians and 50% of Caucasians and less than 5% of Africans. And we were one of the first to show that it's associated with an enriched immune profile. We put forward a trial protocol to test whether this would actually be the case in patients, and we were able to get support from one of the pharma companies to do this trial. And during the pandemic, we launched the trial. We found it quite hard to recruit patients, but we then closed the trial, finished our recruitment, had it selected for oral presentation in the largest oncology meeting in Singapore, which was really nice, and hopefully we're still completing the data accrual part, but hopefully this will lead to a major publication about a biomarker present in the Asian population that actually selects for patients that are more likely to respond to immunotherapy. We've also developed a new genomic biomarker based on gene expression signatures that select for patients that have a homologous recombination deficiency. And we're currently testing out whether this selects for patients that are more likely to respond to PARP inhibitor treatment. This is a trial called TENOR. We were also very fortunate to have won a grant from MSD. So that one is funded by Pfizer. We also have a grant won with MSD, where we're testing a novel combination of immunotherapy with chemotherapy to make these treatment options more available for head and neck cancer patients. And I wanted to share with you how thrilled I am in particular with this, because we actually got together a clinical working group involving doctors who treat a lot of head and neck cancer patients, and we were hoping to bring forward some things from our CRISPR study. And we had all of these discussions where scientists were trying to talk to doctors, and doctors, we didn't understand each other initially. And it was really difficult, but eventually we developed a protocol. And within 1 month, we submitted the grant. And then within 6 months, we opened the trial. So this just shows that actually if you work together collaboratively, we, as Malaysians, we can do pretty amazing stuff. So we're hoping to be able to continue on things like that. And then akan datang, we have, as mentioned, a low-dose immunotherapy trial. So as mentioned, immunotherapy currently is about 300 to 600,000 per patient. It's not affordable. So we now know, based on the literature, that a lower dose regimen may be effective. There was a lower dose trial done for head and neck cancers from the Tata Memorial Hospital in India, but we hope to be able to do this in lung cancer. So fingers crossed, DG is very supportive. Various institutions are supportive, but we need to still raise 6 million ringgit. So that's why I say this morning, I'm a professional beggar. Next slide. So screening and prevention. We have already improved the access to life-saving genetics for ovarian cancer. So we were one of the first to show that 1 in 9 ovarian cancer patients inherited a BRCA1 or BRCA2 gene. We did a mainstreaming study where we trained doctors in 23 hospitals to provide genetic counseling to their patients. And by doing that, we were able to increase access to genetics. We've more recently completed a cost-effectiveness analysis for ovarian cancer, and hopefully that will then help us to put forward a policy paper on how genetics should be offered to all ovarian cancer patients. The second is we've developed the first genetic risk calculator for Asian women, and I'm super proud of this because the work was originally conducted together with a large number of collaborators all over the world, and that was a New England paper. But my team took together the data from Malaysia and Singapore, then built a tool that we've called ARICA, or Asian Genetic Risk Calculator, to be able to determine the risk in Asian patients. And we now have this tool launched in 4 hospitals as part of a clinical trial, but the goal is to expand into other centers. We also have interested parties now looking at the use of this tool in Pakistan as well as in Indonesia and in Brunei. So this is a tool that was created here in Malaysia but potentially has utility in other areas. So we're hoping to be able to use this to improve access to genetics. My colleague Sok Ching and her team have been absolutely fantastic. They have developed a mobile phone tool that initially was just capturing images of the oral cavity, uploading onto the cloud, and then you have an oral medicine specialist on the other end of the cloud reading the images and reporting back. But as you can tell, this is not immediate. So working with a couple of very clever AI guys, we then compiled a very large compendium of images that were carefully annotated as to whether this is an ulcer, this is a premalignant lesion, this is a leukoplakia and so on, or this is a full-blown cancer. And we've now used this bank of images to develop an AI-powered tool. So as we speak, this tool is now being rolled out in a pilot study in Sarawak, and hopefully the minister is going to come and launch MIMOSA, which stands for Mobile Mouse Screening Anywhere. So the MIMOSA app will be available, hopefully, in a not too distant future for rural communities. I particularly like the name Mimosa because I'm sure all of you have played with that plant that you touch the mimosa and the mouth closes. So that's kind of not different from oral cancer. You go to people and they generally want to close their mouth. So we hope that mimosa is like an anti-mimosa where we'll get you to open your mouth instead of closing it. We've also developed, we know that we want to be able to reduce the risk of breast cancer, but doing prevention studies is actually going to be incredibly difficult. So we invested a lot of time and effort in developing biomarkers of breast cancer risk. And in particular, we were studying mammograms in Asian women as a biomarker of risk. We then developed the first cancer prevention trial looking at how drinking 2 glasses of soy might be able to reduce the risk of breast cancer. We were able to recruit that and finish that study. So in terms of Akan Dakan, we have a couple of things that we're doing. We developed the Asian Polygenic Risk Score. We put together a consortium that involved about 45,000 women across Asia to develop a tool that is appropriate for Asian women. And we're now working with Magna and others to figure out whether risk stratified approaches is actually useful for women in the community. And my team are out in the Turun Padang in different locations in Malaysia interviewing women about why they attend screening, why they don't attend screening, why they attend follow-up, why they don't attend follow-up. So we're hoping to be able to do these. We have some interesting data on tocotrienols, a form of vitamin E and this is again a very population-specific thing. So as a population, the consumption of palm oil is much higher in Southeast Asia compared to the rest of the world. So previously, they would have studied a different form of vitamin E called tocopherols, and there was no association between tocopherols and breast cancer risk. But we've got new data on tocotrienols, which may be population-specific. So we're looking at, we've already started a collaboration with MPOB, or the Malaysian Palm Oil Board, and we're taking forward that work to figure out whether we'll be able to do something about reducing the risk of breast cancer. Okay, I talk very fast. So in the last section, it's about closing the care gap. So we set up a patient navigation program together with the Ministry of Health. It started as a 1 center in Klang, and we now have 3 centers that unfortunately opened just before the pandemic, but they're all doing really well. So these centers initially try and hit 3 targets. First, timeliness of diagnosis. The second, timeliness of treatment. And number 3, adherence to treatment. We were able to meet all of the Ministry of Health targets, and it's quite nice that after we launched the program that the WHO also came up with targets and it's almost identical to the targets that we set, which is really nice. We've developed decision aids that are specific for breast cancer patients, and the reason why we do research is not just to offer services to patients, but we use that as an opportunity to develop tools that enable us to do it better. Because if we're just doing capacity building, we're never going to be able to train enough people. Just like with our genetic counselors, we could train more genetic counselors, but that would take too long. So we developed the tools like decision aids, the mainstreaming methods, and so on to enable genetic counseling to be rolled out in a different way. So similarly, in our patient navigation program, we use all of the learnings that we have from the navigation program to actually develop tools that make it scalable in other places, decision aids or bots or other things that are being developed. Akan Datang, we've already pilot programs for navigation for rapid referral from primary care to the hospital, and also from the community to the hospital. So all of these will hopefully help provide a holistic system for patient navigation all the way from their home to survivorship. So I think that's my last slide. I know I've talked a bit too long, too much, but hopefully that's given you an overview of what is Cancer Research Malaysia and what we do. I have a fantastic team that I'm sure will be very happy to collaborate with people. So if you're interested, please get in touch with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. We can now take questions for Prof.
Please. Thank you. At the moment, no. Yeah, so unfortunately, currently, mostly because of capacity, we've only done work for the treatment and early diagnosis area in oral and nasopharyngeal cancer and breast and ovarian and prostate. We haven't really done a lot of work on colorectal cancer for a variety of reasons, mostly because of capacity. We would love to, but we just haven't got to that point yet. Yeah. I don't know, Mr. Wong, Kwan Seng always scold me. Mr. Wong, of course, is a prostate cancer survivor. He's a very good friend. So he always say, Prof, when are you going to work on prostate cancer? So yeah, I have to say, surrender a bit. We would love to, but in part because of funding, in part because of manpower, we haven't had a chance to work on those yet. Absolutely right, yeah. There are other reasons why we haven't worked on colorectal cancer. Breast cancer has got a very large variation between populations. So in other words, high-risk populations and low-risk populations across the world, the difference in risk is about 3 times. Colorectal cancer, the risk difference is almost directly associated with diet. There are very few kind of genetic differences between colorectal cancer patients. So as a research organization, we need to think about what is unique about our research programs. And in colorectal cancer, we haven't been able to identify what is the uniqueness of a colorectal cancer at the moment, which is part of the reason why we don't study that. One of the areas that we want to study a lot more of, we had a pilot program on this with the Silent Mentor program, was to look at lung cancer in women who are non-smokers, who develop EGFR positive lung cancers. And this is much, much more common in the Asian population. So we wanted to study that. So from a strategic point of view, that's probably something that we will want to focus on first. Yeah. Sorry, I'm very straightforward, tell you why it's like that. Yeah.
Any other questions from the floor?
Prof, I was wondering, just on top of my head, there's a lot of communities, like, they like to burn things at home.
Yes.
I think it's like not researched yet properly.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree, yeah.
Because I think that is probably like the cause of lung cancer in a lot of people.
You're so perceptive. That is absolutely true. So one of the guys that I have huge amount of respect for is the chief scientist for Cancer Research UK, and his name is Charlie Swanton. He's done a lot of work on lung cancer. And so, as you know, in lung cancer, you have different genes that drive different types of lung cancer. You have the EGFR positive, you have the RAS positive, the MET positive, the ALK positive, and so on. And what they were surprised to find is that if you look at normal lungs of individuals, they already have mutations in EGFR. So that suggests that cancer may be more common in many more individuals than we suspect, but the immune system is doing something that suppresses that. So what we now know is that the carcinogens are not just involved in changing the genes that drive cancer development, but also in changing the tumor microenvironment that enables this cancer to grow, where other individuals don't have the cancers growing. So his current thinking, and there's a lot of data to show this, because you can look at particle matter pollution in different parts of the world, and there's a direct correlation between particle matter in the environment, air pollution, with the level of EGFR positive lung cancer, which basically means it suggests that EGFR mutated lung cancers develop not just by the presence of the mutations, but by the impact of the environment and the pollution on the ability of the immune system to continue to suppress the development of cancers. I think that really changes our thinking around cancer development overall. I think the future of cancer prevention is really going to be able to help us figure out what is the role of the tumor microenvironment and how is the environment in which we live actually going to be important for controlling cancer, if you like. Because our way of thinking previously was carcinogens mutate DNA, and when they mutate DNA, you get cancer. Actually, now we think that that's one pathway. The second pathway is carcinogens do something else, and it's the something else that makes some people more likely to develop cancer compared to others. We don't understand that enough. Yeah. So that's very perceptive. Very good.